It all started on a cold, rainy evening. I was sitting at home, feeling too lazy to cook. The rain poured down outside, and the sound of thunder echoed through the sky. I decided to order food delivery from my favorite app. Scrolling through the options, I chose a restaurant I hadn't tried before, but had great reviews. The menu looked delicious. I picked a pasta dish, a garlic bread side, and a slice of cheesecake for dessert. The app estimated the delivery time to be 40 minutes. I placed the order, excited for my meal to arrive. As the minutes ticked by, I noticed something odd. The app kept pushing the delivery time back. 40 minutes turned into an hour, then an hour and a half. I tried to contact the delivery driver through the app, but there was no response. The tracker showed the driver stuck in one spot for a long time. Frustrated, I called customer support. They assured me the driver was on the way and asked me to wait a little longer. I sighed and decided to be patient, but as another 30 minutes passed, I started to get nervous. Finally, after what felt like forever, the app notified me that my order was delivered. I got up from the couch, relieved that I would finally have my food. But when I opened the door, there was no one there. No food, no delivery bag, nothing but the cold, wet street. Confused, I checked the app again. It showed the order as delivered, with a picture of my porch. But in the picture, the food bag wasn't on my porch, it was on someone else's. The photo showed an old wooden door with peeling green paint, a door I'd never seen before. I immediately contacted customer support again. They apologized and said they would refund my order, but that didn't explain where my food had gone or why the delivery driver had taken a picture of the wrong house. As I hung up the phone, I heard a faint knock at my door, not a loud knock, but a soft, almost hesitant one. I opened it quickly, hoping it was the driver returning with my food, but no one was there. On the ground, where my food should have been, was a small, plain box. There was no logo or branding on it, just a brown cardboard box sealed with black tape. It didn't have my name or address on it either, but it was sitting right at my doorstep. Curiosity got the better of me. I set it on the kitchen counter. As I pulled at the tape, a strange smell wafted out, a mix of something metallic and rotting. My stomach turned, and I hesitated. Inside the box was a single item, a folded piece of paper. The edges were stained with something dark and wet. I unfolded it carefully, and my hands shook as I read the message. It simply said, "Wrong address, but they'll enjoy your meal instead." A glimpse of something else, a chill ran down my spine. I grabbed my phone to call someone, anyone, but as I was about to dial, the screen flickered. My phone froze, showing nothing but static. The lights in my apartment flickered too, and for a brief second, the room plunged into darkness. When the lights came back on, I saw something on the far side of the room. It was a shadow, just barely visible, standing in the corner near the window. It didn't move, but I could feel its presence. My heart raced as I backed away toward the front door. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. The shadow seemed to shift, almost like it was laughing silently at me. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it was terrified. I locked all the doors and windows. I told myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, though deep down, I knew something was wrong. The night dragged on, and I couldn't stop thinking about the box, the note, and the shadow. Around midnight, I received another notification from the food delivery app. It said, "Your second order is on its way," but I hadn't placed another order. This story will expand into a chilling sequence of events with escalating supernatural occurrences, eerie deliveries, and a connection between the mysterious shadow and the delivery driver. Let me know if you'd like me to continue or adjust the tone. I stared at the notification on my phone, my stomach sinking. I hadn't placed another order, and the idea of a second delivery showing up uninvited sent chills down my spine. My fingers hovered over the app as I tried to cancel the order, but the option wasn't available. It was then I noticed something even stranger. The name of the restaurant was blurred out. The delivery driver's profile picture was just a black circle, and the estimated arrival time said, "Soon." My instincts told me to ignore it, but I couldn't shake the fear creeping over me. I kept checking the window, scanning the street for any sign of a delivery car. The minutes dragged by, and just as I was beginning to convince myself it was a glitch, I heard the sound of a vehicle pulling up. The headlights bathed my living room in a harsh yellow light. Peering out the window, I saw an old, rusted car parked outside. The engine idled noisily, and the driver didn't get out right away. I could barely make out a figure sitting in the driver's seat, unmoving. After what felt like an eternity, the driver stepped out. He was tall and thin, wearing a long coat that seemed soaked from the rain. He carried a delivery bag in one hand. I didn't want to open the door. My instincts screamed at me to pretend I wasn't home, but then he knocked. 3 loud, deliberate knocks echoed through the silence of my apartment. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. I didn't order anything. No response. The knocking came again, louder this time. Against my better judgment, I approached the door and looked through the peephole. The man's face was obscured by shadows, but his eyes, they glinted unnaturally in the dim light. "Leave it there and go," I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. The man didn't move. Instead, he leaned closer to the door. "You should take it," he said in a low, raspy voice. "It's yours now." Before I could respond, he set the bag down on my doorstep and walked away. He didn't return to his car. Instead, he disappeared into the darkness down the street. My hands shook as I opened the door just enough to peek outside. The bag sat there, looking innocent enough, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it. I kicked it lightly with my foot, and something inside shifted. The bag wasn't warm, as food delivery bags usually were. It was cold. Against my better judgment, I brought the bag inside. I opened it carefully, expecting something horrific. But to my surprise, it contained food, exactly what I had ordered earlier that night. Pasta, garlic bread, and cheesecake. The smell was off though. It wasn't the usual savory aroma I'd expected. Instead, it had a faint metallic scent, like rusted iron. I poked at the pasta with a fork, and to my horror, the sauce oozed out unnaturally, as though it was mixed with something thicker than tomatoes. The garlic bread was soggy, and the cheesecake was partially melted, with a strange dark smear across the top. Then I noticed a piece of paper tucked under the food. My heart pounded as I unfolded it. The note read, "Eat it. They're watching." I dropped the note, my breath quickening. The words felt like a command, and I didn't know who they were or what would happen if I disobeyed. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A text message appeared from an unknown number. "We see you." Panic set in. I checked the locks on my doors and windows again, making sure everything was secure. But when I looked out the window, my blood ran cold. Across the street, standing in the shadows, were 3 figures. They were barely visible, but their outlines were unmistakable. They didn't move, didn't speak. They just stood there, watching my apartment. For the next hour, I stayed frozen in my living room, staring at the figures outside. They didn't leave. Every so often, I'd glance at the food bag, as if it held answers. Then the doorbell rang again. This time, I didn't dare open the door. I checked the peephole and saw another delivery bag sitting on the porch. The man in the long coat was nowhere to be seen, but the figures across the street were still there. My phone buzzed again. "If you don't eat, we'll come in." This story could take several directions, including a supernatural confrontation, an unraveling mystery about who they are, or an open-ended psychological horror twist. Let me know if you'd like me to continue or adjust the tone. My heart pounded as I stared at the message. Whoever was behind this knew exactly how to push my fear to its breaking point. The figures outside hadn't moved, but their presence felt oppressive, as if their silence was a warning. I debated my options. Should I call the police, try to escape, or should I follow the cryptic instructions in the hope that it would end this nightmare? The second bag on the porch seemed to taunt me, daring me to open it. Summoning all my courage, I grabbed the bag and brought it inside. This one was heavier than the first. The smell was worse too, an overwhelming stench of decay that made me gag. I opened it slowly, afraid of what I might find. Inside was a pile of raw meat, glistening and dark, as though it had been sitting out for far too long. Beneath the meat was another note, its edges stained red. "This is your final chance. Eat, or they will come for you." The room seemed to close in around me. The figures outside were still watching, their silhouettes barely visible through the rain-smeared glass. My phone buzzed again, another message lighting up the screen. "You have 10 minutes." I panicked, pacing back and forth in my apartment. Who were these people? What did they want? My thoughts raced as I tried to make sense of the situation. The smell of the meat was unbearable, but the fear of what would happen if I didn't comply was worse. I checked the time on my phone, 9 minutes left. My hands shook as I picked up a fork and hovered it over the disgusting pile of food. Could I really do this? Then came the knock. This time, it wasn't just at my front door. It came from the windows, the walls, every surface of my apartment seemed to echo with knocking. It was as if the figures outside had multiplied, surrounding me completely. My fear overwhelmed my disgust. With no other options, I forced myself to take a bite of the meat. The texture was slimy and cold, and the taste was worse than I could have imagined. I gagged, tears streaming down my face as I forced it down. The knocking stopped. For a brief moment there was silence. I thought it was over. But then, I heard a new sound, a low guttural laugh coming from the shadows of my apartment. I turned toward the noise, and there it was. The same shadow I had seen earlier now stood in the corner of my living room, but this time it was clearer. It had no distinct features, but its shape was vaguely human, and its presence was suffocating. It spoke, its voice like a whisper carried on the wind. You obeyed, but it's not enough. Before I could react, the shadow lunged toward me, and the room was plunged into darkness. When I woke up, the apartment was quiet. The food bags were gone, the shadow was nowhere to be seen, and the figures outside had vanished. It was as if nothing had happened, but my phone held a chilling reminder. A single notification blinked on the screen. Thank you for your service. Enjoy your meal. I deleted the food delivery app that night, but the feeling of being watched never left me, and sometimes, late at night, I hear faint knocking at the windows, even though no one is there. A week passed, and I tried to convince myself it was all a bad dream. A strange, inexplicable nightmare brought on by stress, or maybe something I ate. I avoided using any food delivery apps, cooked all my meals at home, and refused to answer the door, unless I was expecting someone. But no matter how hard I tried to forget, the feeling of unease lingered. Every shadow seemed darker than it should have been. Every creak in the apartment sounded like footsteps. Then the knocking returned. This time, it was different, louder, more insistent. It wasn't just at the front door, it was everywhere. The windows rattled, the walls vibrated, and the air seemed to pulse with an unseen force. My phone buzzed on the table. With shaking hands, I picked it up. The screen showed a single message: "We are here." The lights in my apartment flickered, and the air grew icy. I backed into a corner, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The shadows in the room deepened, stretching unnaturally across the walls and floor. From those shadows, figures began to emerge. They were the same ones I had seen outside that night, tall, faceless shapes that radiated malice. They surrounded me, their forms blocking out the light, their presence pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't escape. As they closed in, the largest of them leaned down, its voice a chilling whisper. "You should have finished the meal." The last thing I saw was the shadow enveloping me, swallowing the room in total darkness. When my friends finally came to check on me days later, they found my apartment empty. The door was locked from the inside, and there was no sign of a struggle. But there was a single delivery bag, untouched. Inside was a note written in shaky handwriting. I couldn't eat it. No one has seen me since that night. I was fond of ordering food late at night, but after a long, exhausting day at work, I decided to treat myself. It was around midnight when I opened the food delivery app, my stomach growling. After scrolling through a few options, I settled on a pizza place that I knew had a great reputation. The order was simple: a large pepperoni pizza, garlic bread, and a soda. I tapped the screen, confirmed the details, and hit place order. The app estimated it would take about 30 minutes to arrive. I sat back on the couch, the sound of the TV filling the silence in my apartment. But as the minutes ticked by, I couldn't help but feel a strange unease. The time on the app kept updating, showing that the delivery was getting delayed. I shrugged it off at first, thinking maybe traffic was bad. But then an hour had passed, and I started to get concerned. I checked my phone again. The delivery app said the pizza was on its way, but it had been over an hour since I placed the order. I decided to call the restaurant. After a few rings, the line picked up. "Hello, this is Joe's Pizza. How can I help you?" A voice answered. "Hi, I placed an order about an hour ago and it hasn't arrived yet. Can you check on it?" There was a brief pause on the other end. "Sure, let me check the system," the man said. I could hear typing in the background. It says the delivery driver should be nearby. It should be there any minute." I thanked him and hung up, but something didn't sit right with me. I had lived in this area for a few years, and there was no reason for a delivery to take so long. I looked out the window, half expecting to see a delivery car pulling up, but there was nothing. Just the dimly lit street below, empty except for the occasional passing car. Another 15 minutes passed. I decided to call the driver directly. I tapped the number on the app, and it rang several times before being picked up. "Hello?" a deep voice said on the other end. "Hi, I'm the customer who ordered the pizza. Where are you?" "It's been more than an hour." There was an eerie silence before the man responded. "I'm almost there, just a few more minutes." His voice sounded muffled, as though he were speaking from far away. "Stay inside." "Stay inside," I repeated, confused. "What do you mean?" But before I could get another word out, the line went dead. I stared at the phone in disbelief, a strange feeling crawling up my spine. I got up and walked to the window, peering out into the night. The street lights flickered, and the wind rustled the trees, but still no sign of the delivery. I was starting to get worried. Maybe there was something wrong with the driver. I was about to call the restaurant again when my phone buzzed. I checked the screen. It was a text from the driver. "I'm outside, don't come out yet." The message sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to text back, ask what was going on, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I slowly crept to the door, heart pounding. I had to know if the driver was really out there. I unlocked the door and cracked it open just enough to peer outside. There, standing in the shadows, was a man in a dark uniform. His face was hidden in the darkness, but I could make out the delivery bag in his hand. My heart raced, but I hesitated. What was going on? Why did he tell me not to come out? Was he okay? "Hey, are you okay?" I called out, but the man didn't respond. He just stood there, motionless. I was about to step outside to get my pizza when a car slowly pulled up behind the delivery man. The headlights flashed brightly for a moment, then went dark. The car didn't move. It just sat there, and the figure standing in front of my door seemed to glance toward it. His posture was stiff, unnatural, as though he wasn't sure whether to approach or leave. Suddenly, the man turned his head toward me, his eyes reflecting the dim light. There was something wrong. His eyes were too wide, too bright. They glowed faintly. My breath caught in my throat. Without thinking, I slammed the door shut and locked it. My mind raced. What in the world was happening? I backed away from the door, staring at the small window beside it, where I could see the man's silhouette standing still, unmoving. Minutes passed. The car remained parked. The man still hadn't left. I decided to call the police, explaining that there was a suspicious person outside my door, though I was too shaken to give many details. The operator promised to send someone, but as I waited, the man suddenly turned and walked toward the car. The door opened, and the figure climbed in. The car slowly drove away, disappearing into the night. I waited for the police, but they never arrived. No one showed up to investigate. By the time the morning sun peeked through the blinds, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling in my gut. Later that day, I checked my phone and saw that the food delivery app showed the order as delivered at AM, but I never received the pizza. And when I tried to contact the restaurant again, there was no response. The number had been disconnected. To this day, I wonder who that delivery driver really was, and why he told me not to come out. The next few days after the strange delivery incident felt like a blur. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread that lingered in my mind. Maybe I was just imagining things. After all, it was late and I'd been tired. But the more I thought about it, the more the event seemed wrong. The most unsettling part was how everything had gone so quiet. No one at the restaurant seemed to remember me. The delivery driver was never identified, and even the police had dismissed it as some kind of misunderstanding. They said they checked the area and found nothing unusual, but they didn't know what I had seen. What I had felt. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to move on with my life. But one evening, the feeling returned. It was as if the shadow of that night had followed me, lurking at the edges of my thoughts, waiting for the right moment to strike again. It happened on a Wednesday. I was at home, just like that night, relaxing after. The TV was on, but I wasn't really paying attention. My mind kept drifting back to the event, that feeling of something being off. something just beyond my comprehension. I had checked the street outside a few times, but there was no sign of anything strange. The neighborhood had returned to its usual quiet rhythm. I was halfway through making dinner when I heard it, the sound of my phone buzzing. I quickly wiped my hands on the dish towel and grabbed the phone from the counter. It was a notification from the food delivery app. "Your order is on its way." I stared at the screen, my heart skipping a beat. I hadn't placed any order. My fingers trembled as I tapped the notification. The details were the same as before: pizza, garlic bread, soda. The same exact items I'd ordered that night. I checked the app's order history, but there was nothing. No order history, no sign of any payment or request. I immediately checked the time. It was p.m., the same time I had placed the order weeks ago. My stomach twisted. Was this some kind of mistake? Maybe the app was malfunctioning, or maybe someone was playing a prank, but my gut told me something wasn't right. The doorbell rang. I froze. It was quick, almost too quick. I hadn't heard any car pull up. No engine noise, just a sharp ring at the door. I stood still for a moment, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Slowly, I walked toward the door, holding my breath. My hand hovered over the doorknob as I stared through the peephole. Nothing. I couldn't see any. With shaking hands, I slowly opened the door a crack and peeked outside. There was no one in sight, but there, on the doorstep, was a pizza box. It was exactly the same as the one I had ordered weeks ago. The box sealed tight, with a faint grease stain on the top. The edges of the box were bent, as though it had been sitting there for a while. I hesitated, torn between curiosity and fear. What was going on? Why was this happening? I bent down and grabbed the box, my fingers trembling. The weight felt wrong, heavier than it should. I closed the door quickly, locking it behind me. I set the box down on the kitchen table, still too afraid to open it. For a long moment I just stared at it, trying to make sense of everything. The doorbell had rung so suddenly, and there had been no sound of a delivery car or footsteps. Then, without thinking, I opened the box. What I saw made my blood run cold. The pizza looked perfect at first glance. Golden crust, melted cheese, and pepperoni slices arranged neatly. But when I looked closer, the pepperoni wasn't right. It was too dark, almost black. The cheese was lumpy, like something had burned into it, creating a texture I had never seen before. As I stared at it longer, the unsettling thought crossed my mind. It didn't look like food. It looked wrong. I tried to push the thought away, but my stomach churned. There was something wrong with this pizza, something not just in the way it looked, but in the way it felt. I reached out and touched one of the slices. The moment my fingers made contact with the greasy surface, the air in the room seemed to shift. It was as if the temperature had dropped, and a sudden chill wrapped around me. I pulled my hand back, startled, and for a split second, I could have sworn the pizza moved, just slightly, as if it were alive. I stepped back in horror, my mind racing. I couldn't explain it. What was happening? Why was this pizza here? And why did it feel like something was watching me? Suddenly, my phone buzzed again. I almost didn't want to look, but I had no choice. The notification from the delivery app read, "Your order has been completed." The app said I had just placed the order, the same app that had shown no trace of any transaction earlier. That's when I heard it, a soft scraping sound coming from behind me. Slowly, I turned around. In the reflection of the kitchen window, I saw something I couldn't explain. Something was moving in the shadows behind me. It was tall, too tall to be human, and its shape was distorted, like a figure made of darkness itself. The shadows shifted unnaturally, almost as if it were trying to break free from the walls. I gasped and stumbled backward, but the figure didn't move closer. It remained in the corner, watching me with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. The same unnatural glow I had seen in the delivery driver's eyes weeks ago. Then the figure spoke. Its voice was like a whisper carried on the wind, cold and hollow. "You ordered, we delivered." I backed away from the window, my mind racing. My pulse pounded in my ears. I had to leave. I had to get out of there. But before I could make a move, the figure disappeared into the shadow. The phone rang. I looked down at it, my fingers trembling as I reached for it. It was the same number I had called weeks ago, the pizza restaurant. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice shaking. The voice on the other end was the same deep one I had heard before, but now it was colder, more distorted. "Your order is ready." Then the line went dead. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my coat and ran out the door, not even bothering to lock it behind me. I didn't care about anything anymore, except getting as far away from that place as I could. The pizza, the figure, the voices, it was all too much. I didn't stop running until I found our diner. I sat there for hours, unable to process what had happened. My phone was dead, my hands were shaking, and my mind was racing. But when I finally returned to my apartment the next morning, it was gone. The pizza box. The strange, dark figure. It was like it had never happened at all. Still, I know the truth. Whatever that delivery was, it wasn't just a pizza. It was something else. Something that would keep coming as long as I stayed in that apartment. Days passed, and I tried to forget what had happened. It felt like a nightmare that was fading with each sunrise. I moved back into my apartment, but the sense of unease never fully left me. Every time I glanced at the door, every time I passed by the kitchen table, I half expected the pizza box to be there again. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had happened was far from over. I moved my things around, cleaned up the apartment, and even considered moving out. But every time I looked out the window, I saw the same familiar street, quiet, peaceful, and seemingly ordinary. I tried to convince myself that it had all been a delusion, a trick of my mind. But then, one evening, I came home late from work to find a letter waiting for me on the doorstep. There was no return address, just my name written in a familiar, flowing script. I bent down and picked it up. My fingers My heart skipped a beat when I saw the handwriting. It was the same as the note from the pizza box, the one I had found weeks ago. I tore open the envelope, my eyes scanning the words. "You thought you could escape. You ordered, we delivered. And now, the debt is yours." A cold shiver ran down my spine as the words burned into my brain. I dropped the letter as though it had burned my skin. My head spun, and the room seemed to close in around me. Panic surged through me, suffocating. I heard a faint scraping noise again, coming from behind me, just like before. I turned slowly, my breath catching in my throat. There, standing in the shadows of the hallway, was the same figure, the one I had seen in the window, the one who had spoken to me in that cold, hollow voice. Its shape was distorted, just like before, stretching unnaturally in the dim light. Its glowing eyes bored into mine, and for a moment, I thought I would collapse from the sheer weight of its gaze. "You cannot outrun the delivery," it whispered, its voice echoing around the room. I backed away, shaking uncontrollably. The figure did not move closer, but it didn't leave either. It just stood there, like a shadow waiting for the right moment. I ran for the door, flinging it open, but the figure remained where it was. I was about to step outside when a chilling realization hit me. There was no escape. The delivery had been made, and there was no way to undo it. The deal had been struck, and whatever dark force had taken my order, it wasn't going to let me go. I turned back, terrified, and the figure took a step forward, its glowing eyes narrowing. "The debt is yours now, forever." With a final scream, I slammed the door shut and locked it. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure: I was no longer the one in control. The delivery was the beginning of something far worse than I could ever have imagined. And so, I waited, alone, trapped, knowing that the price for my order was now far beyond a pizza, and it would come back for me, one way or another. It was just an ordinary Friday evening when I decided to order food. After a long week of work, I didn't feel like cooking, and the thought of a warm meal delivered straight to my door sounded perfect. I opened my phone and browsed through the options. I'd heard about this new delivery service recently, and their website looked sleek and professional. The reviews were mostly positive, though there were a few complaints about late deliveries. Still, I wasn't in a rush, so I went ahead and ordered a pizza. The menu was vast, offering everything from pizzas to burgers to more exotic dishes. I decided on a simple pepperoni pizza with garlic bread and a soda. After a quick glance at my bank account, I confirmed my order. The website promised the food would be delivered in minutes, so I set my phone down and relaxed on the couch, waiting for my meal. Half an hour later, I received a notification that my order was on its way. I got up, excited, and paced around my living room. The thought of not having to cook was already a relief. As the minutes ticked by, I grew a little impatient, but didn't think too much of it. Delivery times can vary after all. But then, the doorbell rang. I rushed to the door and opened it, expecting to see the usual delivery person with a pizza bag. Instead, there was something odd about the whole situation. The man standing there wasn't like the typical delivery drivers I'd seen before. He was dressed in a dark uniform, but it seemed a little too formal. His eyes were shaded by a cap, and he didn't speak a word as he handed me the bag. His movements were slow and deliberate, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. "Thank you," and quickly shut the door behind me. The bag felt strangely heavy, and as I opened it, I was greeted with the smell of something burnt. The pizza didn't look like what I had ordered. The crust was oddly charred in places and the toppings seemed off. I hesitated for a moment, but hunger got the better of me. I took a slice and bit into it. It tasted fine at first, but then there was something about the aftertaste. It was metallic, like chewing on a penny. I frowned, set the pizza down and took a sip of my soda to clear my mouth. The soda was flat too. There was something about the entire meal that felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Just as I was about to check my phone for the delivery status, I heard a faint noise coming from the other room. It sounded like a soft thud, almost like someone knocking on the walls. I froze for a moment, my heart racing, but when nothing happened, I brushed it off. Or a creaky floorboard, but the air in the room began to feel thick and heavy. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt my throat tighten. Something was wrong. The walls seemed to close in around me, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch unnaturally long. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I looked over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing behind me, but there was nothing there. The noise from the other room returned, louder this time, a soft scratching, like nails on wood. I stood up, shaking off the eerie feeling, and walked cautiously toward the hallway. The house felt cold now, much colder than it should be for a night in the middle of summer. As I walked down the hall, I looked back at the pizza sitting on the counter. It seemed to be moving? No, that couldn't be right. But the pizza box was shifting slightly, as if there were something underneath it, pressing against the lid. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw it. There was a shadow under the pizza box, something large and black, like a crawling shape. The box moved again, and I stumbled backward, my breath coming in shallow gasps. What the hell was going on? I stood frozen in place, staring at the shifting pizza box. The shadow beneath it continued to move, an unnatural, slow writhing that seemed to beckon me closer. My heart hammered in my chest as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Could it have been a rat or some kind of animal? But the shape under the box didn't resemble anything I'd ever seen. It was wrong. I took a step back, but the noise behind me, the scraping, like fingernails on wood, grew louder. It wasn't coming from the hallway anymore. It was coming from the kitchen. I turned around quickly, my eyes darting toward the open. And in the dimness, I could make out a figure. It was the delivery driver, but he wasn't standing normally anymore. His body was bent at an impossible angle, his legs twisted at unnatural joints, his arms stretched out in front of him like a spider's limbs. His face was no longer the familiar human face of the man who had handed me the pizza. Instead, it was a grotesque mask of flesh, featureless except for dark, empty holes where eyes should be. I stumbled back, my throat dry, panic bubbling up from deep within me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I turned to run, but as soon as I reached the front door, it slammed shut with an overwhelming force, as though something was holding it from the other side. I pounded on the door, screaming for help, but the house felt wrong. The walls were closing in on me. The shadows in the corners grew deeper and more oppressive, wrapping themselves around me, suffocating me. The smell of burnt food, of rot, filled the air, choking me with its foulness. I heard it then, the voice, a whisper so soft, so quiet, it might have been in my head, but I could swear it was coming from the dark figure in the kitchen. "You shouldn't have eaten it," it said, its voice low and chilling, like the sound of dry leaves in a graveyard. "You shouldn't have taken the food. Now, you're ours." I backed away from the door, my eyes wide with terror. There was no escape. I was trapped in this nightmare. The figure in the kitchen moved toward me, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette controlled by strings. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. The figure's mouth opened, revealing jagged teeth, blackened and stained, and I realized with horror that it wasn't human. It never had been. As it the situation. The food, the pizza, the garlic bread, the soda, they weren't just tainted with an odd taste. They were a part of it, a part of something much older and darker than anything I could have imagined. The delivery was a ritual, a way to feed something evil, something that needed bodies to feed on. I turned to run again, but the walls were shifting now, the house itself warping as though it were alive. There were no longer windows to escape through, and the door, locked, sealed, unbreakable, remained an impossible barrier. Suddenly I felt a sharp pain in my chest, like ice piercing through my ribs. I looked down, and there, in my hand, was a slice of pizza I had forgotten about. The metallic aftertaste filled my mouth once more, and as I swallowed, I felt something cold crawl up my throat. The figure was behind me now, its breath hot and foul against my neck. I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't scream. All I could do was stand there, trapped in the house, the last moments of my life slipping away like the dying embers of a fire. Days passed, maybe weeks. I couldn't tell. The house had consumed me, and now I was just another part of the dark, twisted place. It was no longer a house, but a prison, one that fed on the souls of those who made the mistake of ordering from the cursed delivery service. That watched me from the shadows, his hollow eyes following my every move. The others, those who had come before me, were here too. Their faces were twisted, their bodies distorted, as if the house had stolen their humanity and left them as empty husks. Some were standing in the corners, their forms barely visible, while others were wandering the house, their hollow eyes locked on the doors, forever waiting to escape. I don't know why I'm still here. Maybe it's because I haven't finished the meal yet. The pizza, the bread, the soda, they still sit on the table, waiting to be consumed. It's not real food anymore, but I'm hungry. So hungry. I can hear the delivery driver outside waiting for his next victim. Maybe next time, he'll get someone who's more willing to finish their meal. Or maybe, next time, it will be you.